This tutorial, I show you how to get two looks from one subject. I start with a simple setup: white podium, foam core in the background, a directional lamp, and then just some bright colored objects faced with flowers, keeping it simple. In this version, the lamp is turned off, and you can notice that the object then becomes backlit. So dark face, bright yellow flower there, but the pink in the vase are very dark compared to the podium, and then the white of the background behind it. So this is going to give you a whole different sense of light and a whole different sense of color. Here the lamp is turned back on, so you have a warmer look to the piece overall, and then a shadow. So also the flower has some light on it this time as well, and then you have directional light on the vase. So again, same subject, giving you a completely different scenario. Now it's time to gather supplies. I'm using small wood panels that are prepared with gesso. I also have sandpaper because I often sand in between layers for a better surface. Now I lay out the paint: titanium white, permanent yellow medium, phthalo green, quinacridone magenta, Persian rose, ivory black, and then I have some Winsor violet sitting right there, solvent-free gel, and Venetian red, which I tend to use a lot for underpainting, adding neutral tones to colors as well. Now I lay out all the paint, primarily from light to dark. Yellow and white are close to each other because white won't muddy it. I keep my blacks and my violets close as well. Here I mix a base: quinacridone magenta and Venetian red. What I do is I kind of mix this generic base and then add colors to it as I'm blocking the initial layers. So I'll add white, I'll add violet, I'll add ivory black, depending on what I'm seeing in front of me. This way allows me to find a range of values, but keep the palette close for now. Once I start to add contrast, it will probably be in the green range. But again, for now, I want to keep the colors close. I'm not too worried about what I'm seeing in front of me. So going back to the still life over here, so you can see kind of a dark, weird gray there. So I want to interject and take a moment to talk about what you're going to see in the time lapse. And when I talk about that kind of weird grayish magenta that I'm mapping out the vase with, I want to show you where that looks with the physical object, okay? So behind me, I have the paintings farther along, so you'll see where that goes eventually. But right here, I have the vase that's going to be in the still life, and I kind of want to break down for you what's actually happening. So when you see me paint it, I don't paint. You can see there's darker at the bottom, and then it's a little bit lighter here with some highlights, glaze, things like that. So you can see a lot of different detail and distinction. But when I paint it, I do not paint it like that. What I look for is kind of a mid-tone base that I can then layer and divide on top of, okay? So you almost kind of have to, you'll see through the examples in this tutorial where there's either a lamp hitting it, or of course the first one is just room light. And you can kind of see, if I hold this up, I'm just gonna hold this up right here. And you can see here that the overall object is darker than the white wall behind me. Okay, if you get to me and my skin tones and what I'm wearing and stuff, that starts to get confusing. But you can actually see that from the vase to my hand to my body, everything is kind of one value in comparison to what's happening with the white wall behind me. And I don't want to start out my painting by painting every single color that I see. I actually want to look for unifying colors and unifying values. Okay, so you're gonna see that in the time lapse where I just go straight for a unifying base color. It's really kind of this one here that I see in the shadow. I paint that everywhere and then start to divide out from that. And why do I do that? Well, I do that because that guarantees that this entire object will stay darker than the wall behind it the entire time. So you'll see also in my setup, this is important because there's areas that are super light, whereas this, in contrast, as a whole, is darker than that, okay? Of course, you can see some highlights here, and here, but those are just kind of things that you put on at the end to add accents. And sometimes you tone that down to a certain degree as to not detract from the overall structure of the piece itself. Okay, so again, reminder, you can kind of see it going on right here. Everything here is a couple, like about 4 shades darker than everything going on back there, and you want to make sure to unify that. If you're moving along in your painting and you feel like things have gotten too separated, you can always reunify. You can always use a color that puts everything together and make sure, once again, that the values of the painting or the object are all over darker than whatever is around it, or vice versa. If this was lighter, then this would have to be 100% lighter than what was behind it. Okay, again, you can kind of see even in this video, this is backlit. So I'm backlit, this is backlit, and then you want to unify that. You can see this is acted out. You're going to see the time lapse, but then you're going to also see this entire, when I'm almost close to finished with this, and the entire vase is still reading darker than the background. Okay, so next will be the time lapse, and you'll see how the first pass of the painting evolves. In this time lapse, I slowed it down a bit so you can see me first map out through drawing just a little bit of paint on the brush, and that was the base that you saw me mix. Again, same base is going to the top half of the vase. I'm going to put the darker lower half there, but not as dark and localized color-wise as I actually see it. So basically, it's just the base that I mixed with the quinacridone magenta and the Venetian red, and then adding a little bit of black. Now I go straight to the background so that I can make sure that I'm getting the color contrast okay. So a little bit of green in that so that I can give it some color contrast, let that red feel a little more vibrant, but everything's grayed down a bit. But the main thing is the values. I want the value to be light in the back so the vase feels darker in the front. Now I put a pop of color there. That's actually with the Persian rose and a little quinacridone, so it's brighter. The yellow is really bright too. I want everything else to be really muted so that the flowers really, really pop, even though I don't have lamp light. That is the first pass of this painting. So now to wrap it up, I'm going to show you both of the paintings almost to finish, just a few little tweaks and some detail work that I'm going to do with these small little paintings, one with natural room light and one with lamp light. So let me go ahead and pull these up and put them side by side. Like I said, sometimes I let them dry a little bit and then I kind of look them over and see if there's any other detail work that needs to happen. Okay, so this one again is the natural room light. Might need a little bit more of a yellow pop here. That was kind of in the setup. You can see that there's not much directional shadow or anything. The shadow is actually just kind of soft and underneath because there was no directional light. In something like this, sometimes too, the actual colors of the flowers get pinker or redder because they're just kind of allowed to glow in the room, okay? Again, the look of the pot here is much more unified and darker. Here, on the other hand, I have a lot more warm and cool contrast. I actually did add some phthalo into this here, so there's phthalo green into the dark. You can see the dark bases. I just use those as an opportunity to kind of play with color. So in both of these situations, the top pinkish part of the vase is pretty similar. This is a little bit more of a mauve violet. This, I took some more liberties with those fleshy pinks. But you can see at the bottom, I'm taking some liberties because it's just dark and it's reflecting light differently. And I'm taking some liberties with that to play with color. The shadow here, I kind of kept a neutral gray, whereas this one, I'm adding a lot more cool to offset the warm that's coming into the flower here, right? Remember, I have directional lamp light on that one, so it's a little bit different. You can also see too that the plants here, the leaves, I'm allowing a lot more yellow-green saturation where the light is hitting here, whereas this, again, is staying kind of close and neutral. Okay, so some subtle shifts, some subtle differences, but it's a really fun exercise. Again, also last thought here too, the background, just kind of going from gray, keeping it very cool to offset the warm lamplight. Here I was actually playing with a few different colors in the white areas because it can do that since the light is diffused throughout the room, okay? Again, you can take the same setup, you can change up the lighting, you can change one object, you can barely like minimally swap out a vase, but you can get a lot of different looks from a similar still life. When we're thinking about this, I always like to go back in time or art history to Monet and how Monet would experiment with the same subject and paint it at different times of day. He did that with the hay bales. He also did that with the Rouen Cathedral. And there's many, many instances, many gardens that he was in, the water lilies, where he would literally pick apart the same subject over and over and over. And the only difference in all of those was the minutia of the light, some subtle movement, some subtle changes of color, and so on and so forth. Again, this really hones in on the fact that painting is a work of fiction. You can get so many different interpretations of the same object by using color in a very creative way. And I can encourage everybody to take risks and do that, okay? So if you find that your work is getting a bit stale, your palette is a bit similar over and over and over again, just simplify your subject matter and see how many different ways that you can take it. That is all for now. I'll see you again in the studio soon.